opinion on Sky News Australia starts now. Live, this is Outsiders.
Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to feminism gone off the rails what the young woke women of today are to the continuation of the human species.
Does society need men?
Yes and no.
No.
So why yes and why no for you? And then I'll ask you why you said no.
Well, because in today's society, sometimes you don't need the male to have a baby anymore.
Yeah.
Really, that's fascinating update there. Yes, who needs men when women can do it all themselves?
It's more of like if men just died right now, could we survive? Yes, because of the new research that they're doing. They it's possible for lesbians to have a baby
Without a male sperm.
Right.
Yeah, because they turned it into, a sperm.
Yes, that's right there in the hands of Generation Woke. The future of mankind and womankind and personkind and je-kind and G-kind has never been more assured.
I'm trans and my sexuality is unlabeled. I use he, him pronouns.
Yeah, and I use he, they pronouns.
Fluid.
Fluid. Can you explain what that means to me a little bit more?
Whatever turns you on.
I guess you could call me gay. I'm homo-flexible, really. I do like some women, but mostly men.
Glad we cleared that up then. And now let's grab the latest Outsiders news. Censorship, folks, it's all around. They're coming for you. The Australian E-Commissioner is busy slapping fines left, right and centre. We'll be talking about her later on in the show during Clown Show, the appropriate place for her. That's Julie Inman-Grant. Censorship, as I say, is everywhere. Rita, Elon Musk has been retweeting your tweets. Quite right. Rita the tweeter, known around the world, rightly so. Why has Elon Musk been retweeting Rita?
Are you asking me that? Well, no, I mean, we had a discussion, as we often do, about censorship, about this drive for so-called disinformation, misinformation laws, which are really just censorship. They try to present it as advancing community safety. That is not what they're doing. What they're trying to do is to stop you accessing information that you should be able to access and treating people like they're idiots. And to seize upon this alleged terrorist incident in Sydney to try to push these laws, I think is particularly ugly and opportunistic, and it needs to be called out. Julie Inman-Grant, the so-called E-Safety Commissioner, let's remember, appointed by coalition government.
By Malcolm Turnbull. Absolutely.
She may be a leftist activist, but she was appointed by a supposedly conservative government that values free speech, please. And that office, that was sold to us on the basis that it's going to be tackling child exploitation, online
which you would expect.
Sex offences. That's not what is happening. No. It seems the takedown orders we're getting, like the one on that trans activist Teddy Cook, that wasn't about child exploitation at all.
Well, let's have a listen to so we know who we're talking about. Here's Julie Inman-Grant telling you what you can and can't listen to or hear.
So if they fail to remove the content, then we can go to the search engines such as Google or Bing to really minimize the amount of content the Australians can see. Minimise,
James, the amount of content Australians can see. You heard it there from the lips of our chief censor.
This is really, really sinister, because what's happening now, Rowan and Rita, is that this global wave of censorship, we've seen this happening in Ireland, we've seen this happening in Canada, we've seen this happening in other European countries, is crashing here on the shores of Australia. And it is all about a global movement by governments that have lost control of the narrative because of social media, They no longer get to tell you what to think. There's no longer the monopoly of approved media providers and so on. So therefore, they need to stop this. And, we saw this start during the pandemic and how much they absolutely hated alternative viewpoints on all sorts of elements of the pandemic, how it was managed, lockdowns, vaccines, everything else. A lot of things that were called misinformation, by the way, turned out to be absolutely correct.
100%.
Now we are seeing this here. And you know what? The thing is, this whole move by people like Julie Inman Grant and this government, but also backed in by the coalition, many in the coalition, I have to say, it really has its roots in totalitarian China. This is this whole idea that we need to preserve social harmony. That's the sort of thing that Chinese leaders say when they say, we're not going to talk about this topic or allow you to post about that topic because it could upset people. Well, you know what? This is a free country. This is a democracy. I think the coalition here needs to rediscover its first principles on free speech and say no to this.
Well, it's not a free country. And Rita, carry on, but it is not a free country. It is being censored right in front of your eyes. We just saw that earlier on Sky. All the politicians, Rita, are behind this thing.
It is absolutely disgusting to see this happening in a free country. There's a similar crackdown happening on X, formerly Twitter, in Brazil.
Yes.
And Australia is now in that camp. Are we some sort of banana republic here where the people can't be trusted? And as James mentioned with COVID, if the COVID era taught us nothing else, it's that it's important to get free information. We had Harvard, Oxford, Stanford professors silenced and censored during COVID. And they've been all vindicated because they were challenging some of these draconian measures and saying they're not based in science, they're not going to actually help, they can actually do a great deal of harm and be counterproductive. And perhaps if those voices were heard more widely, we wouldn't have such a catastrophic response as we did.
And during the pandemic, we had, for example, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand saying that the government was the sole source of truth. She said it repeatedly, the sole source of truth. Turned out to be wrong, by the way, that sole source of truth, but they insisted on it. Now we have Karen Webb, the police commissioner in this country, saying exactly the same thing. Have a listen here.
There is misinformation being communicated across social media, and people should not share any of that information. The source of information should be from police and law enforcement authorities, and if people have concerns, they should check our websites, our socials.
This is, let me just say quickly, let me just say, this is an absolute disgrace. This is a free country. The police commissioner is not the sole source of truth. This is disgraceful how a tragedy is being used by our parliamentarians on both sides. Liberal, we've just had Simon Birmingham basically agreeing to this misinformation push. We had Murray Watt on earlier. They're all doing it. We've had Chris Minns going, oh, yes, misinformation. That's what it's all about. Blame social media. They are attacking your freedoms. This is totalitarianism coming out of your computer at you. Have a listen to Chris Minns, for example.
This is exactly as I'd expect from X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. A disregard for the information that they pump into our communities. Lies and rumours spreading like wildfire. It's about time that we strengthen rules in relation to the e-Safety Commissioner or the federal government. All penalties that are in place for social media companies, we would all be in favour of that.
No, no, no. That is authoritarianism. That is totalitarianism. Our politicians are out of control, James.
Well, Chris Minns here, this is really disgraceful here because, of course, the issue that they're speaking about here, this has to do with, to bring people from other parts of the country into the frame here, unrest that occurred at an Assyrian Christian church after the bishop there was allegedly stabbed in what police have described as a terrorist incident. Now, the community there was very upset about that, and they acted up and they acted out, and we don't support that at all. But, we didn't see them saying when the police were told to step back and allow people to go and set off flares and chant the most vile things about Jewish people on the forecourt of the Opera House. We didn't see Crispin say, oh no, we shouldn't show anything from the Gaza attack or anything like that because that might get people riled up. No, so people are very rightly concerned, and this is it. This is a double standard here that is at work here, and it depends whether or not you are a favored group or not, whether you get censored.
And there was... okay, I'm not going to... There's been charges laid, so let's not get into that. But for the police commissioner, for the politicians to say there's a single source of truth, and that's the government and that's the police force. This is a police force that took months to investigate a chant we all heard and then decided what we actually heard wasn't what we heard.
Absolutely.
It was a very, safe, where are the Jews chant. Not
it was a mostly peaceful protest.
It was a mostly
and
peaceful
yet there
protest.
are stat decks saying people heard gas the Jews. And Rita, I spoke the other day to a gentleman from Mosman who was out at the restaurant above the event and heard quite clearly gas the Jews. So you're right, the police are not the sole source of truth. And to attack social media over this event they are using it. The cynicism is profound. And where are the Liberal Party? We had Simon Birmingham. Have a listen. Playing along. Have a listen.
Being able to back in authorities to quickly, forcefully force social media companies to remove violent content. You think about the way these social media companies work. They are able to push into our phones and our devices.
And then listen to Albanese again on censorship. Why are all of them, the Premier of New South Wales, the Police Commissioner, the leader of one of the senior leaders of the opposition in the Senate, and why are they all there? The Prime Minister as well. Have a listen. They're all pushing censorship.
We have Michelle Rowland's taken really strong action with some of the online products, Facebook, X as it's now known, to get material taken down as well. That can be really, really confronting. The misinformation, disinformation, as well as using online propaganda to promote hatred. The authorities need to be given whatever power they need to crack down on these issues.
Whatever power they need. No. We saw what you did with power during COVID. We saw it. You cannot have more power over us. This has to stop. Fight this censorship. Refuse to believe the lies and the spin they are telling you. They're also trying... By the way, I left out of our rogues gallery, the Giggles up there in Queensland, who's trying to censor youth crime. He wants censorship of that. The governments are out of control, Rita.
They are, and sadly, much of the media seems to be lockstep with them. Instead of challenging them on these very draconian, illiberal measures, they seem to be just parroting the official line without any sort of scrutiny. It is absurd, it is dangerous, and it's not going to stop at what happened earlier this week. It's going to be criticism of the LGBT agenda, as we've seen already with Julie Inman-Grant. One of the takedown orders was about that issue. And they don't. And when they start talking about promoting hate, it's material that could possibly promote hate. That is a red flag that should start waving in your head, because they are trying to stop you getting information that you're entitled to get. We already have laws against incitement threats. So if someone posts something that is defamatory, that is threatening violence, then there are police measures that can be employed. But to go over that and say, well, this could be inspiring hate or mockery.
Well, it's worse than that. Let me just pick up on something Rita said there, because a good friend of mine and Rita's, Jasmine Sussex, over a year ago, she's a midwife who's done great work for 17, 20 years, helping women with breastfeeding and so on and so forth. And she was censored by Julie Inman-Grant simply for saying that men cannot breastfeed. She was censored.
Yep.
So they're lying to you. They're going to distort the truth. This censorship is not about them being the sole source of truth. It's them being the sole source of lies, and we don't get anything else. This is so dangerous. It has to be stopped. It has to be called out. And where are the media sitting there going, oh, yes, this is fine. Yes, let's have this. Let's have this. James.
Well, there's so much misinformation that's put out here by this government. I mean, do you think Julie Inman Grant would ever say to the Twitter and Facebooks of the world, anytime you see anybody posting about Anthony Albanese promising $275 off your power bill, take that down because that is false and that is misinformation. You'll never, ever see that because with all of these things, of course, it always slides in one direction. It is always promoting a statist, leftist narrative against the freedom agenda. People who love freedom depend on social media. Thank God Elon Musk is out there and understands this and gets that This is the crucial issue for all of our societies, not just Australia, all across the West, all across the world. If we do not have free speech, if we do not have the freedom to say, this just happened, what just happened, talk about it, discuss options, we are living in a totalitarian world. I'm sorry, that sounds hyperbolic. It is not, because when you've got the cops saying, we're the sole source of truth, when we've got the government saying, don't talk about this issue because it may hurt, our version of social cohesion, then that is North Korea. That's not Australia.
And Elon Musk, just quickly on Elon Musk, he is suing the Australian e-safety commissioner or the government because they're trying to globally, they're charging fines of over $500,000 a day, something like that. This is insane. And who will get hit for it? You, the Australian taxpayer, because this e-safety commissioner has already got a massive $42 million budget. She's on $455,000 salary, money left, right and centre. You will end up paying out of our taxes to defend the e-safety commissioner, who we don't want censoring us, from X, who are suing her because it's completely insane.
But I've got to say, whatever it costs us, what Elon Musk is doing is absolutely
fighting for our freedom.
Crucial. Mm-hmm. It is so rare to have someone who's a billionaire, world's richest man, I think, sacrifice his own money, sacrifice his own standing, because remember, he was the golden boy before he kind of got involved in this area, because the social media platforms themselves have sadly been run too often by people who are very happy to submit to any sort of censorship. Facebook, we saw them get rid of that completely accurate, legitimate story about Hunter Biden's laptop in the lead up to the 2020 election. That's the sort of stuff,
sole source of truth, yes.
So for Elon Musk to sacrifice billions to buy Twitter, X, and now to have this platform that's going to be about free speech, it is so important to the ideological debate that's happening
Elon Musk must
West.
win this. He must win this. He's fighting for your and our freedoms against the governments of this country, right across the board. Stand up, Peter Dutton. Say enough of this. This has got to stop. We've heard from Birmingham. Don't want to hear from him again. Thank you very much on that topic. Peter Dutton, you've got to stand up, fight for the freedoms that the Liberal Party has always supported, the freedoms of each individual to choose for themselves what news they want to hear from themselves, different stories from different points of view. That is freedom. It is essential to our democracy, not government or police control over what we hear or say.
And Rowan, this is a real opportunity, too, for the coalition to come out. We heard some real shilly-shallying from Simon Birmingham there in that interview about the misinformation bill, the bill that's being pushed by Michelle Rowland, which would give ACMA, who are the Communications and Media Regulatory Authority, huge amounts of authority to go and call people in at their choosing, say, you report here when we tell you to explain this post, with the threat of a huge fine as a result of that. And, all of this stuff here, when you go back and you look, there were Freedom of Information requests that found that the government was talking internally about how, thankfully, the First Amendment, like they have in the U.S., isn't a thing here.
That's right.
When they were talking about how to better clamp down on your right to talk about what you want to talk about online. We saw how this had played out in Victoria. Remember people getting arrested for liking the wrong post during COVID? This is the same thing, and they're going to make it a national thing. The coalition needs to say, when this misinformation bill comes to Parliament, we are voting against it, and get as many crossbenchers on board to make sure that thing, that complete offense to free speech and the liberal Enlightenment society that you hear our leaders talk about, we're an enlightened society, Well, if that is, then this misinformation bill has got to die.
I don't hear about we're an enlightened society. All you hear is the buzzwords of inclusive and tolerant, which for them can mean whatever the hell it wants to mean. But what worries me that Peter Dutton needs to say this to his colleagues. If you're a Conservative politician, this should just be in your DNA. This should be a matter of conviction. This is like The Voice again, where it took the coalition or the Liberal Party 10 months to figure out, this is actually not a great thing, dividing the nation by race and giving certain people special privileges based on their racial characteristics. And this shouldn't be something that they need to discuss and come to a position on. It should be absolutely apparent to them this is wrong for the country.
Absolutely.
It is a backward step. And it worries me about the sort of people that we are attracting into the Conservative side of politics.
But I agree with you, Rita, but we now have Peter Dutton. We don't have Morrison or Turnbull. It was Morrison, Turnbull, Fletcher, Birmingham, that whole gang of bedwetters who first introduced this sort of stuff. Peter Dutton, you've got to be as strong on this as you have been, as Rita says, on The Voice, as you have been on Israel. I'm going to play you a clip now of Peter Dutton speaking this week at a synagogue. Strong, forthright, proper Conservative and Liberal leadership right here. Have a listen.
Australians who incite or choose violence over that message should face the full force of the law. Non-citizens who incite or choose violence should have their visas cancelled and be deported. As you know, the Foreign Minister recently implied that the current government is prepared to recognise a Palestinian state. It was Hamas's barbarity on October 7 which has set back the goal of a two-state solution. Until Hamas is defeated, a two-state solution isn't even conceivable because Hamas will always pose an existential threat to the State of Israel. That's why I characterise the Foreign Minister's remarks as utterly illogical, as ill-timed and inappropriate. Israel has every right to defend its territory and its people.
Illogical and reckless. The same can be said about this disinformation, misinformation stuff. Peter Dutton has to come out hard against this. Simon Birmingham, please don't ever open your mouth on the topic again. I know that's censoring you, but someone has to.
It's for his own good.
For your own good, mate. For the country's good. In the same week that Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen launched their marvellous Made in Australia, Future Made in Australia, Renewables Revolution, we're going to be the renewable superpower, we're going to be this, that and the other, we're going to build solar panels and all the rest. We learn that there's, first of all, and I shouldn't laugh because it's very, very sad for the people who've lost their jobs, but two major companies, QINOS and Tritium, have both gone under this week. They're two of the companies that we should be building our future on. Manufacturing companies, James, one of them involved in renewables, the other involved in polyethylene. These are the companies of the future. Jenny George, a former Labor minister, has said, we will not build a future Australia if we don't have enough gas supplies. The clowns that are running the show, the Albanese cabinet, is an absolute farce. They launched Made in Australia as one after another the dominoes come tumbling down around us. Manufacturing ceases to exist in this country because we can't afford the energy. Well, that's what you've done, Labor. That's what you've done, Bowen. You've done it to us.
I mean, let's put this also into sort of the broader context, too, of what we've just been talking about. Let's think about what kind of a country Australia is be coming. So it's going to be a country where there's, if labor has their way, no free speech. You listen to the authorities, you listen to the cops, you do what you're told, you don't get out of line, because that's national unity, where you don't have any sort of manufacturing or economy, adding value to anything, and where all you've just now got, and you're going to see a lot of this in the budget, which is coming up on May 14th, everybody. Watch for your tax dollars being put into funds, many of which are going to be off-budget funds to encourage industry, they're going to say, but which is going to go to big-time investors, all of your AGLs, all your Michael Cannon Brooks, all of these sorts of people out there who have got their hand in the government trough here for these solar schemes and all of these other things where they're guaranteed a return by your tax money because they don't actually have to provide the cheap energy anymore. But we are a country that should be so prosperous off the bat of cheap and plentiful, constant energy, and we are throwing away with both hands. Our economy is going in the toilet if we don't have this. We're propping up the GDP with mass migration, with all the effects that has on everything from housing to social cohesion, as we've talked about, and we're not going to be allowed to talk about it. Is this the Australia that we want? I really, really hope that's not where we're going, but think about it.
Well, it is the way we're going, Rita, because you have a controlled economy on the one hand and you have a controlled media and what you hear on the other hand. That is the classic, basic formula of communism. Control censorship on the one hand and control the economy on the other and decide who gets what money. James has just described communism. That's what we are getting under this government, and the Liberal Party have to stop it and must win the next election. We've got to get rid of the Teals. They got to go. We've got to get the Liberals to get rid of this government because they're destroying this country in front of our eyes, Rita.
Yes, and this plan to become some sort of a solar panel superpower, it is so absurd that even the leftist Grattan Institute has mocked it. I mean, it is patently ludicrous to think that with one of the highest paid workforces anywhere in the world, we're going to manufacture solar panels that are going to compete with China using Uyghur slave labour. And already there's a glut of solar panels
around the world,
from what we're hearing. So what market are we going to be? And this, they donated, what, $1 billion of our money to that plan and who becomes rich from that? The people who are already becoming very rich through renewables, mainly through taxpayer largesse.
And if you question it, you can't question it because don't forget, the government and the police are the sole source of all information. We'll take a short break. I hope we'll be back on the other side of it.
Probably not. You're watching Outsiders with your host, Rowan Rambunctious Dane, and prodigal son James Murray is back. And I'm Rita Panahi from The Rita Panahi Show, Monday to Thursday, 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday,
Excellent.
11 p.m. And this week we began a new show on Fridays called Lefties Losing It. That's right, 9:30 p.m. on Fridays, an entire program devoted to mocking the illiberal, idiotic and ideologically rotten left.
This is a world. They give their viewers anything to try to make America look bad. They are obsessed.
And for that reason, you guys want to criminalize us with metal detectors? We'll see you at your house. We'll murder you.
My name is Alex, and my pronouns are Pearls.
People were chanting death to America. Do you condemn?
Talk to Fox News.
But do you condemn chants of death to America?
Then comes the 2 to the 3 to the 4. Everybody drunk out on the dance floor. Baby girl ass jiggle like she want more. Like she a groupie and I ain't even know.
Millions every week are watching our Lefties Losing It clips on our digital platforms such as YouTube. And while it's important to have a laugh at some of the utter lunacy the left insist on inflicting on the world, it is also important to call out this ugly, illiberal, hate-filled dogma that masquerades as caring and inclusive. Take what happened in London this week, where during the regular pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel rallies, police decided to target a man for looking Jewish. And they told him if he was going to stand around peacefully, looking openly Jewish, then they would arrest him.
are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to it now. You've been escorted out of this area so you can go about your business where you want freely, or if you choose to remain here because you are causing a big trouble to these other people.
If I remain here, you will arrest me.
Because your presence is antagonising a large group of people, and we can't deal with all of them if they attack you or they because your presence is antagonising.
Because his mere presence would antagonise them, really, these peaceful protesters calling for a ceasefire, that's grounds for arresting the Jews standing around observing a protest and not those who are triggered by his mere presence. It's London in 2024, folks, where being openly Jewish is tantamount to a crime. And it got worse. Watch as the police stand around and observe as this man, Gideon Falter, is abused and threatened and do nothing to help him.
Taxi!
You need to keep going before you get arrested.
Watching a movie. That's right.
This man saying that he's going to start following me around watching my movie.
That's right. We're all going to watch a movie and record you. Wait. No. The police ain't going to help you in this scenario.
He was right. The police are not going to help you. It's mob rule, and the police are standing with the mob. Now, after that video went viral, thanks to X, by mind you, the platform Australia's e-safety commissioner is at war with and wants to censor. After that incident went viral on X and hit the headlines, the police put out a disgraceful statement. It was supposed to be an apology, but it was really a victim-blaming exercise. In a statement they have since deleted, but we have the receipts, the Metropolitan Police claimed in recent weeks we've seen a new trend emerge with those opposed to the main protests appearing along the route to express their views. The fact that those who do this often film themselves while doing so suggests they must know that their presence is provocative, that they're inviting a response, and that they're increasing the likelihood of an altercation. They are also making it much more likely officers will intervene. So, yeah, it's their fault. It's their fault for being openly Jewish, as you heard there in the clip. Now, in farcical scenes, the Metropolitan Police then deleted that statement and apologised for their earlier apology. I don't know, maybe the Met Police should investigate themselves for committing a non-crime hate crime. That's a thing in the UK. And if you think that incident was isolated, just a one-off, then you've got a very short memory indeed, because we've seen similar incidents in Melbourne and Sydney where those wearing a kippah or having an Israeli flag are arrested or marched off by police to avoid antagonising the mob. In Edinburgh, police told this man to hide his Star of David because it could set off the protesters and they wouldn't be able to protect him.
Yeah? You're not doing anything wrong, okay? You're not doing anything illegal. Is that if people see your star, which I appreciate that you feel deeply with, they will just get very, very angry.
Now, imagine if police were approaching, I don't know, women in hijabs during a white supremacist march and threatening them with arrest for antagonising the mob, or if they ordered them to take off their hijab to keep the peace. There would be mass resignations in the police force. The entire police hierarchy would be scrutinised. Right now, we have this two-tier policing in places where leftist ideology has taken hold, and that sees the activist class held to a very different standard, and that's true not just for these anti-Israeli protesters, but those taking part in global warming protests, BLM, whatever the lefty cause is that week.
Great stuff, Rita. Well, joining us now, and appropriately, he's in Australia. What a time for him to be here. Brendan O'Neill, a chief political reporter for Spiked Online. He's over here now with the Centre for Independent Studies, and the IPA have brought you out. Brendan, it's great to see you back in Australia. You've come at the right time, mate. You had a sellout speech in Perth there. You've got a speech on Tuesday night at the CIS. People can still get tickets to that, cis.org.au. That'll be a terrific evening. You've arrived here. What do you make of Australia's reputation in the world, where we have Elon Musk suing the Australian e-safety commissioner because she's determined to protect us all from seeing the truth?
You know, I love coming to Australia. I love Australia, but you guys have gone super woke over the past decade or so. I used to think Australia was immune to this kind of stuff. I used to think Australia, because it's so far away and it has this tradition of just not listening to figures in authority. I thought Australia was immune to all the stuff that's been washing over America and Britain and Europe over the past few years. But it is starting to creep in here, quite sadly. And the cancel culture has taken hold in parts of Australia. The crusade against misinformation, so-called, is a new form of censorship dressed up as providing good, decent information. But, you know, there are also flickers of hope in Australia. I mean, your ballot box revolt against the Voice to Parliament was inspiring. That inspired people around the world. I think it kept the flame of Brexit and populism more broadly. It kept that flame going. So there are flickers of optimism, but I do think, you know, we've got to put a stop sign up now to this woke crusade that is moving like a juggernaut across the Western world.
James.
Well, I want to ask you, though, about that. Do you think that part of the reason why we're seeing such a push by the authorities in this country is because they're rebelling against the people who voted against what they wanted them to during the referendum? I mean, we heard during the referendum all the time, this was about misinformation. If only people knew the truth, they would have voted the right way. Is this the authorities punishing Australians for voting the wrong way?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. We had the exact same thing in Britain after we voted for Brexit. There was suddenly all this talk about misinformation and the need to control the flow of information online, because they couldn't believe that we defied them. We didn't take their advice. Virtually the entire establishment in the UK, the political class, the cultural elite, the business world, they all said to us, you must vote Remain, otherwise this country will go to hell in a handcart. And we didn't believe them. We said, sorry, we're going to vote Brexit. We're going to do our own thing. And because we defied them, they will never forgive us for doing that. And they instituted all these new ideas about controlling the internet, clamping down on misinformation, making sure that our minds are not brainwashed by demagogues, etc. It's because we voted in a way that they didn't like. And we saw similar developments after Americans voted for Trump in 2016. Suddenly there was a huge fear-mongering about the internet and the free flow of information. And we know that the Biden, the Democrat camp, has worked with Silicon Valley to restrict what people can see on the internet. You know, we know they've shadow banned people who were very critical of lockdown. They conspired to ban the Hunter Biden laptop story and to prevent the New York Post from being able to run with that. So censorship is their solution to the fact that ordinary people are no longer listening to them. They can't believe we're thinking for ourselves. And I think we're seeing a similar development in Australia, where they are reprimanding the Australian people for defying the establishment and slapping these new forms of censorship on you because you did your own thing.
Rita.
Brendan, your view on Australia, you mentioned that perhaps has shifted over the past decade, and I'm wondering how widespread that is, because we saw the reaction in Australia, Melbourne having 6 COVID-era lockdowns. Do people in the UK, the US see us differently now? Have we lost that image we had of having that larrikin culture and live and let live? Are we now seen as the Karens of the world?
I don't think it's gone quite that bad. I don't think you're the Karens of the world, but I think people are worried about the larrikinism and the decline of it. And, you know, one of the people who went viral during the COVID era was Dan Andrews, the psychopath in Victoria. You know, I know he horrified many Australians, but he horrified people around the world. Clips of him went viral in the UK and other parts of the world as well. And the thing that horrified most was not only the crazy rules that he was bringing in, and other premiers were bringing in as well, but the tone with which he would talk to people during his press conferences. He would basically was telling people off. He was like he was the headmaster and you were a classroom full of disobedient children who needed to be put in detention. It was that really contemptuous tone that he had. And I think what it really revealed, not only in Australia, but across the Western world, is that there is an authoritarian instinct within the political establishment. Very often they can't let it out. They can't just let it run free because there will be pushback. But during the COVID era, when there was a lot of fear, a lot of terror, people were worried about catching this virus, they could finally unleash their inner authoritarian beast and do all the things that they've long dreamed of doing. So we need a reckoning with what happened during COVID. We need a reckoning with the fact that even a country as wonderful and free and as Australia basically put people under house arrest. We need a reckoning with the fact that in Britain, for the first time in history, we were not allowed to leave our homes without the say-so of the state. So all of these things...
at least, Brendan, you had those dancing nurses and things. I mean, so there was all of that excitement to keep you going, and the clapping.
He just gave me PTSD there, Brendan, because I can now remember Dan Andrews scolding Victorians for watching sunsets. Remember?
That's right. You couldn't watch the sunset. You had the virus
devoted
of the sunset.
a press conference to telling us off for watching a sunset.
Now, Brendan,
at the beach.
I want to ask you about what happened in Europe during the week, where they shut down a national conservatism conference. Suella Braverman was going to speak there, Nigel Farage. They did eventually finally get a venue and had the conference. But this sort of thing, this is cancel culture yet again. What is happening in Europe and Britain? I mean, it does feel, particularly when you see separate issue, but the British Parliament changing its rules because of intimidation from Islamic mobs. How totalitarian is Britain going? What's happening? And Europe as well?
Yeah, there's big problems in Europe. And I think the attack on the NatCon conference was a good example of that. This was cancel culture, but not just being carried out by crazy blue-haired kids. This was cancel culture backed up by the police in Brussels. And the mayor sent the police there and told them to shut this conference down. Thankfully, they didn't succeed, but they really wanted to do it. This was a borderline fascistic assault on freedom of speech and freedom of association and the right of people to gather together and spread their ideas among each other. That is a fundamental right in a free society. And, you know, Brussels and the EU, they pose as these pinnacles of freedom and reason, but now we've seen the true nature of these people. And, you know, do you remember when we voted for Brexit and when Americans voted for Trump? We were all told that the 1930s were coming back, fascism was on the rise again. But actually, if you look at what's happened in Europe and Britain over the past few years, it's not the populists who've brought that culture back. It's the anti-populists. You know, it's the left in Britain who've helped to make it virtually a crime to be a Jew on the streets of London. Well, it's the EU and Brussels and all these liberal wets in Europe who are trying to shut down the freedom of speech of political people. These are tyrannical acts, and they're not being carried out by Trumpites or Brexiteers. They're being carried out by the anti-populists, and they pose, I think, the greatest threat to freedom and democracy today.
James.
And Brendan, I mean, these anti-populists, you talk about fascists. Well, these people are now basically backing in Iran, the mullahs of Iran. They're backing in essentially Hamas, and we're now seeing Joe Biden start to crab walk away from Israel. You've written about this. How does the left, which supposedly, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, they used to be all about freedom. How do they now decide that they're all now on the side of Iran, of all people, the mullahs in Tehran?
Yeah, the woke left have become cheerleaders for Iran. They've become cheerleaders for one of the most regressive regimes in the world, a regime where women don't have freedom, where gay people don't have freedom, where many people don't enjoy the freedoms that we're lucky enough to enjoy in the West. And yet, because Iran is standing up against the evil Jewish state, which is how the left tends to view Israel, they're on the side of Iran. And I think it really demonstrates just how crazy people have been driven by Israelophobia. They hate Israel with such a passion that they are willing to take the side of Iran, even Hamas. We've seen so much sympathy for Hamas in the West over the past 6 and 7 months. You know, look at the current protests at Columbia University in New York. This is a bunch of privileged, fascist Hamas fanboys and fangirls saying openly anti-Semitic things and openly demanding for the genocidal destruction of the Jewish state. Their chanting, their latest chant is, "We don't want two states, we want all of it." They want to wipe Israel off the map. And these are the people who, for the past few years, have posed as anti-racist, anti-sexist, in favor of equality, and so on. And yet, when a racist movement invaded Israel and raped and butchered and murdered Jewish men, women, and children, they either turned a blind eye or they openly supported it. So all of their moral authority has collapsed to an extraordinary degree over the past few months. And I think we should never let them forget what they've been doing.
Well, the left's moral compass is completely broken. They show that consistently. But if people don't have a clear choice of the ballot box, then we're going to keep getting versions of this moral relativism from the left. In the UK, you've got the Tories who've been in power now for some time, and yet it seems like the leftist bureaucracy run the show, and Rishi doesn't seem to be much better than his predecessors. Is there any chance there that someone like a Suella Braverman could be leader and give the people a real choice? Because we've seen it right here in this country and in other elections. When people don't have a choice, then, you know, we're not a real democracy.
We need Kemi Badenoch, Brendan.
Well, yeah. Exactly. You know, I mean, Labour is going to win the election in Britain this year. Keir Starmer is going to be Prime Minister. It will be a complete disaster for the country. This is a man who doesn't even know what a woman is. And he says, you know, he was recently asked, can a woman have a penis? And he says, well, most women don't have a penis, which means that some women do. So, and he doesn't believe in freedom of speech. This is a man who devoted the past 8 years of his life to trying to overthrow the largest democratic vote in the history of this country, the vote for Brexit. He was at the forefront of demanding a second referendum. This is a man who doesn't believe in democracy or freedom or even biological sex, and he's going to be running this country. So it's terrifying. The Conservatives will be out of office, and I hope they will use that time to try and get their act together. They need a better leader than wooden, technocratic, fishy Rishi, as some people call him. Yeah. They do need someone like Kemi Badenoch, who's got great principles, who can connect with the public, who stands by her guns even when she's under attack from the woke left. We need that kind of figurehead to come through and really engage with people's desire for economic security, cultural respect, the right to live as they want to live, and no more finger wagging from the state. We need a politician who can cut through all of that and give people the decent life they deserve.
Hear, hear. Brendan O'Neill, always great to chat to you. Great to have you back here on Outsiders. Enjoy your time in Australia. Tuesday night, cis.org.au. You can get your tickets there. And well done to the CIS and IPA for bringing Brendan back out here. Always great to have you here, mate. Thanks so much. After the break, your favourites, Net Zany, Lefty Lunacy, Wackademia. So much happening here on Outsiders. Don't go away. Always great to chat to Brendan O'Neill. And there is another event on Thursday in Sydney as well. You can get details of that, where Brendan will be appearing. Details on the Australian Jewish Association website, which is aja.org.au. Brendan O'Neill, great bloke. Now, Net Zany, the crazy, insane, wacky world of net zero policies, and they are completely out of control, as we said earlier. The future made in Australia is looking increasingly wobbly, particularly if you get the opinion of the CEO of Alinta Energy, Jeff Dimery, who spoke this week at the National Press Club. Have a listen.
Renewables are the cheapest form of power.
Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy.
Renewables are cheaper. Renewables are cheaper. Renewables are...
You came here for truths and straight talking about the transition, so here's a doozy. Australians will have to pay more for energy in the future. We will spend more as a percentage of GDP on energy services and energy infrastructure. Whether we pay through the tax base, or pay the large upfront cost of an EV, or batteries and solar, or we're paying more for electricity from the grid, we'll all pay more in aggregate. We need to be honest about that. And I don't think the average Australian is prepared for that reality.
Well, we're certainly not prepared, but the fool who is the head of the Liberal Party, the leader of the Liberal Party in Queensland, the man who put fool into his own name, Chris Fooley, has come out and said that Queensland, under the Liberal Party opposition, will back a 75% reduction in emissions target. This is the state that lives off fossil fuels and that Australia relies on, along with WA, obviously. Rita, can you believe this fool?
It's like they want to lose. You look at this and you wonder, what is the motivation? What is the thinking? Are they so preoccupied with a few of those inner city seats around Brisbane, holding on to those, that they are willing to sacrifice the state? This is the Victorian Lib model of mediocrity and craziness. This is not the way to actually give the people...
We saw it in Victoria, we saw it in WA, Victoria. They will lose.
This is, Queensland opposition was on such a good wicket right now. Stephen Miles was throwing it away with both hands, giggling over youth crime and all of that. I probably can't say that. That's probably misinformation now. But, you know, this reminds me so much of, he's basically Christofouli is pulling a Bob Brown in 2019, going around Queensland, regional Queensland, and talking about, you know, how we've got to end the fossil fuel industry. This is just absolutely insane.
Here's
These
the
communities that rely on fossil fuels, they don't have an alternative now. Where are they going to go?
Well, here's the bloke, the clown. Put him up, Sam O'Connor, please. He's the climate dude in the Liberal Party. He's the one, shadow environment. And he's the bloke who's pushed this. He's out there saying, oh, we've got to do this 75%. You're in the wrong party, pal. Join the Teals. Join Labor. You're in the wrong party. So I would say to people, you can write the Libs off now in the state election there in Queensland. Vote One Nation if you want to get rid of these fools who don't deserve the name of the Liberal Party. They don't deserve it. And the people of Queensland deserve so much better. It's a wonderful state, wonderful people, and you've got a joke of an opposition like this backing in this crazy net zero nonsense.
A conservative state that is highly dependent on fossil fuels. And to have both parties, both major options, go with this policy, really. And also, we should point out that the Queensland Libs, I think they're just counting on it's their time, that the people are fed up with Labor, the polls are so bad.
Lazy.
And so,
they don't deserve to win.
Anyway.
It's Zach Kirkup. It's Zach Kirkup again. It's that, what was it, your bloke down there, your Matt, whatever his name was? Prosciutto. It's the same old stuff. And as Matt Canavan has pointed out, on the very day that the Libs in Queensland, this is the state Liberal National Party, the very day they decided, the Libs, to go for 75% net zero, net zany reductions target, the Scottish Parliament ditched their 75% target. So there you go.
Oh, those
on the very same day.
Exactly.
Why did they ditch it? Because it doesn't work. Because you impoverish yourself, because you won't have any industry or lifestyle to hand on to your kids. Your prosperity will go down the gurgler. That's why they abandoned
And what about doing this as the Dutton opposition is formulating a nuclear policy?
A great nuclear policy, exactly. Got to go to a break. Back in a tick here on Outsiders. Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita, Head in the Clouds, Panahi, James, Clouds in My Coffee, Morrow, and myself, Rowan Cloud-busting Dean. We are, in my opinion, living in the era of the grand scams. And have I got a doozy for you today? By simply applying the basic formula made popular in the 1940s book, The Big Con, I intend to expose each and every one of these scams week by week and the grifters and the con merchants behind them. It was the book, The Big Con, that brought us a treasure trove of slang, the rag, the payoff, ropers, shills, and characters with names like Barney the Patch, Larry the Lug, and the seldom seen kid. I love that one, the seldom seen kid. That's what they could call Albo up in Alice Springs. But I digress. It was, of course, The Big Con that inspired the Oscar-winning film The Sting. Best of all, The Big Con gives us a simple formula for exposing scams. The 4 key stages: the setup, the hook, the tail, and the sting. 2 weeks ago, I told you about the big con known as diversity and inclusion. That's certainly a scam that's full of rauters and grifters. But the aristocrat of modern cons, the king of them all, is, of course, the climate crisis scam. The climate crisis scam is so vast, so all-encompassing, and the sums of money so extreme that it's not just one scam, it's hundreds of them, all intertwined, all making huge profits for the grifters and the con merchants and the snake oil salesmen and women. As far as I'm concerned, there's the EV scam, the renewable scam, the doomsday scam, the farting cows scam, the sinking islands scam. The list goes on. And I intend to devote a segment to every single one of them, don't you worry. But today I want to introduce you to one particular scam that's been bothering me for a while. Is it real? Is it fake? Who's making money out of it? How? It operates under several different names, has some bizarre and mysterious components, and the big tell It is shrouded in secrecy. Or it was until a fortnight ago when an article appeared in the New York Times, of all places, and I quote, April 2nd, a little before 9 a.m. on Tuesday, on the deck of a decommissioned aircraft carrier in San Francisco Bay, a device resembling a snowmaker began to rumble, then produced a great and deafening hiss. A fine mist of tiny aerosol particles shot from its mouth, travelling hundreds of feet through the air. It was the first outdoor test in the United States of technology designed to brighten clouds and bounce some of the sun's rays back into space, a way of temporarily cooling a planet that is now dangerously overheating. If it works, says the article, the next stage would be to aim at the heavens and try to change the composition of clouds above the Earth's oceans. That's the New York Times. What could possibly go wrong with this harebrained scheme? The article goes on. Brightening clouds is one of several ideas to push solar energy back into space, sometimes called solar radiation modification, solar geoengineering, or climate intervention. And then comes this ominous sentence, the tell. The idea, says the New York Times, of interfering with nature is so contentious, organisers of Tuesday's test kept the details tightly held, concerned that critics would try to stop them. The article goes on, although the Biden administration is funding research into climate interventions, including marine cloud brightening, the White House itself distanced itself from the California event. Even David Santillo, a senior scientist at Greenpeace, sounds the alarm. He says this is a scary vision of the future that we should try to avoid at all costs, he said. Well, according to the New York Times, the experiment on the aircraft carrier involves specially built sprayers shooting trillions of sea salt particles into the sky. So let's apply my big con test: the setup, the hook, the tail, and the sting. Let's start with the setup. Well, as so many of today's climate crisis scams, the setup is the same. The world, we are told by the authorities, is doomed, and all species, including humans, will be extinct within X many years or months. Fill in the blank, depending how stupid or young and gullible your audience is. We are all familiar with the setup. Next comes the hook. In 1990, a British physicist named John Latham came up with the idea you could control global warming by injecting tiny particles into clouds. He had a bizarre proposal to create a fleet of 1,000 unmanned sail-powered vessels to traverse the world's oceans, continuously spraying tiny droplets of seawater into the air to change the composition of clouds to deflect solar heat from the Earth. Weirdly, the pop star Kate Bush had made a video for her song Cloud Busting about a machine to create rain. Although why anybody in England would want to do that is beyond me. So that's the hook. Imagine if we could create cloud cover to save the planet. Next we get the tail. Again from the New York Times, we learn that in 2006, the Microsoft founder Bill Gates began funding climate research into solar geoengineering to reflect the sun's rays. Yes, that Bill Gates, one of the wealthiest men on planet Earth, decided to fund research into solar geoengineering or cloud brightening, including funding the engineer famous for devising Xerox's ink cartridge nozzles to design a nozzle that could push air at extremely high pressure to create enough force to smash salt crystals into exceedingly small particles. Then, 5 years ago, it was reported in the Daily Mail that Bill Gates was funding a $3 million project called SCOPEX, or sky clouding, which planned to use a balloon to spray millions of tons of dust into the stratosphere to create a gigantic sunscreen to stop global warming. What could possibly go wrong? Fast forward to November 2022, when two of Biden's key climate change advocacy institutions, NOAA and the Department of Energy, held a joint workshop to investigate marine cloud brightening, and then they published this report, and I quote, "Marine cloud brightening refers to the deliberate injection of aerosol particles into marine clouds to increase their reflection of solar radiation to cool the planet." But the workshop itself raised several worrying questions, including, do we have adequate systems in place to detect and quantify the effects of such an intervention, as well as admitting that, quote, large-scale knowledge gaps as to how small perturbations of cloud brightness might affect large-scale circulations and the extent to which these might contribute to regional changes in precipitation. Meanwhile, also in California, there's a mob called Make Sunsets who are selling the opportunity for you to help cool the planet by releasing thousands of balloons filled with helium and toxic sulfur dioxide and exploding them in the stratosphere. So far, they boast of having achieved 26,000 tons of cooling. I'm not joking.
Hi, my name is Andrew Som. I'm the co-founder of Make Sunsets. We launch reflective clouds into the stratosphere to cool Earth. The eventual mission of Make Sunsets is to reverse global warming. It works by copying what volcanoes have been doing for millions of years. There was a volcanic eruption back in 1991, Mount Pinatubo. It launched 20 million tons of SO2 into the stratosphere and it cooled the Earth by 0.5 degrees Celsius. What we're doing is copying that by using balloons to launch reflective particles into the stratosphere. It's super leverage. 1 gram of our material offsets the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. So it's 1 to million leverage. There isn't a lot of solutions out there that has little amounts that can offset a ton. I have 2 kids and I really care about their futures. I want them to live in a world where they're not impacted by catastrophic climate events.
Yes, exploding toxic sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere to save the planet from man-made global warming. You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, now we've had the setup, the hook and the tail. Let's get to the sting. Yes, you can buy cooling credits from this mob of what I choose to call grifters. You might prefer a different word, to do your bit to cool the planet and prevent sunlight from reaching Earth for as little as $16 a credit. Quote, by purchasing a cooling credit, your funds will be used to release at least 1 gram of our clouds into the stratosphere on your behalf, offsetting the warming effect of 1 ton of carbon dioxide for 1 year. If you or your company wants to offset more than 1,000 tons of CO2, please enter a quantity over 1,000 cooling credits and an automatic discount will be applied. What a scam, in my opinion. But how big is this crazy global cooling, solar, geoengineering, cloud brightening stuff? For several years now, people, particularly in Europe and the States, but also here in Australia, have been complaining or commenting on social media about these so-called chemtrails or chemical trails crisscrossing the skies. You might have seen them yourself. The conspiracy theory is that governments or big corporations or who knows who are deliberately and secretly doing their own bit of solar geoengineering, cloud brightening, by releasing chemicals into the air to create clouds to cool down the Earth. Indeed, the state of Tennessee the other day voted to ban geoengineering in the state, and they were ridiculed by the mainstream media for it, with one outlet suggesting next they'll be banning Bigfoot. Aha, get it? But when does conspiracy theory become conspiracy fact? Here in Tasmania in 2016, Hydro Tasmania conducted cloud seeding operations which were then blamed by locals for exacerbating the heavy rains and deadly flooding that occurred in northwestern Tasmania.
Residents in southern Tasmania are demanding to know why cloud seeding was conducted over the Derwent River catchment the day before the worst floods in 40 years. Cloud seeding is a technique used to increase rain. Hydro Tasmania has confirmed it flew a cloud seeding flight despite the weather warnings. Farmers believe the technique could have made the flooding worse. The Premier says a formal inquiry will be held into the effect and handling of the floods if it's necessary.
Hydro Tasmania's independent report some months later claimed that the seeding had no measurable impact on precipitation, whatever that means, which was a conclusion further supported by an independent expert. OK, that's fine then. Although coincidentally or otherwise, Hydro Tasmania's website states that Hydro Tasmania no longer conducts a cloud seeding program. Cloud seeding flights stopped in June 2016. Not so in New South Wales, however, where, according to weatherzone.com, cloud seeding is still practiced in the Snowy Mountains, carried out by none other than the government-owned Snowy Hydro Limited. Yes, Malcolm Turnbull's much-loved, multi-billion-dollar blowout Snowy Hydro Limited, the same mob who want to push water uphill to save the planet and whose tunnel digger Florence got stuck in the mud for over a year and who are massively over budget on their Snowy 2.0 scheme, that same hapless mob have for years been busily cloud seeding in order to, quote, enhance snowfall over the Snowy Mountains to increase the amount of water available to produce clean, renewable energy. Yep. Our government is busy spraying stuff into the clouds so that we get more precipitation, so that we've got more water to push uphill, using loads and loads of energy and giant pumps so that we can have more renewable solar panels and windmills and transmission lines crisscrossing the countryside so that we can save the planet from global warming. Which takes me back to that comment in the New York Times article. The idea of interfering with nature is so contentious, organisers of Tuesday's test kept the details tightly held, concerned the critics would try to stop them. Meanwhile, according to the Financial Review this week, the desert nation of the United Arab Emirates was trying to dry out on Wednesday from the heaviest rain ever recorded there after a deluge flooded out Dubai International Airport. The flooding sparked speculation that cloud seeding may have caused the deluge. Several reports quoted the National Centre for Meteorology as saying that they flew 6 or 7 cloud seeding flights before the rains. But experts said that storm systems that produced the rain were forecast well in advance and that cloud seeding would have caused no such flooding.
The UAE government invested more than $20 million in research to start a process called cloud seeding. The UAE performs around 1,000 hours of cloud seeding a year, and it's all controlled by this building in the National Centre of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, where they track the whole process. We met with a cloud seeding expert to explain how the seeding process works.
We wait the forecast. When we have a good, chance for a cloud, we send the aircraft to that location. It go under the cloud. In the first stage of the cloud, there is good updraft at that time, start to release all the salt, and with the good updraft, of course, it will go inside the cloud. The droplets will become bigger and start to rain.
The centre manufactures a salt substance that helps enhance rainfall. They put them in what they call flares.
Cloud brightening, cloud seeding, solar geoengineering, sky clouding, chemtrails. Someone's making big bucks up there in the heavens above. Sound sounds like a dangerous scam to me. Well, a historic ruling this week from Justice Michael Lee in the Lehrman defamation trial, ruling in Channel 10's favour. Joining us now to discuss this, great friend of this program, the Australian's legal affairs contributor, Chris Merritt. Chris, great to see you. What a week. We all sat glued to the television earlier in the week. We won't go, everyone's gone over the whole Brittany Higgins Lehrman thing. You've written a great article in The Australian on Friday saying the key thing for you, or one of the key things now, is that the payout of $2.5 million, whatever it was, to Brittany Higgins has to be investigated by the National NAC, the National Anti-Corruption Authority.
I think it's inevitable. What this whole affair shows is that the rules governing payouts need to be tightened up.
it's clear that money was paid out on the basis, partly on the basis of allegations of misconduct or failure to support Ms Higgins by her former bosses, Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash. Justice Lee has debunked that. So we now need to find out why Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash were not permitted to put their side of things during the mediation with Ms Higgins. It seems logical that if the Commonwealth is going to compensate a former employee, the Commonwealth should get the side of the employer and see what the facts were, and this didn't happen.
Not only did it not happen, but wasn't there some level of coercion in that if those ministers wanted to participate, then their legal fees would no longer be covered? So there was a motivation for them to not participate.
Yes, that needs to be explained. Logically, you would, if the government's goal is to serve the financial interests of the Commonwealth and protect them, you would have to test a claim that would require a payout by the Commonwealth. And it clearly wasn't done, and they went out of their way to ensure it wouldn't be done.
Yeah.
So it's the rules, I think, that have been shown to be just incapable of coming to grips with something that has subsequently been shown to be baseless.
James.
But Chris, there are rules. There are rules around being a model litigant, which the Commonwealth has to adhere to. And they, every time I've tried to report on this, I've hit stonewalls from the government that will not tell you whether or not they went to one of their panel law firms to seek advice on it, who signed off on the final payment, all of these sorts of things. And I speak to people in veterans communities and things like that who are looking for much smaller payouts for compensation that they have sustained, they claim, as a result of an injury while serving the Commonwealth. They are ropeable because they say, well, you know, for us it takes 5-10 years to get a payout, but this seems to have been rushed through. And it does, you know, seem to raise questions that need to be answered so as to clear up, I guess, any lingering mistrust about what happened here.
Look, the rules basically amount to a pea and thimble trick.
Yeah.
There's an enormous loophole in these rules. They state ostensibly that you must have a lawyer's opinion, that there's a reasonable prospect of liability being found against the Commonwealth. But if you can't get that legal opinion, if you can't persuade a lawyer to sign off on untested accusations, right at the very end of the rules, this is in the legal services directions, there's an enormous loophole that says, well, the Attorney-General can simply certify that exceptional circumstances apply and therefore the normal rules should be replaced with who knows what, whatever the Attorney-General decides should apply.
Brittany Higgins has offered she said she's sorry for the hurt this case has caused Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown. That this matter is not over in a legal sense because Linda Reynolds is suing Shiraz and Higgins. What's the latest on that? And will that, or I don't know if it was an apology, but an acknowledgement of hurt, is that going to perhaps see an end to that case?
No.
No.
Linda Reynolds was excluded. She's never had her say. She's never been able to put her side of things. An attempt to mediate the defamation proceedings between Reynolds, Shiraz and Higgins failed, and it's pretty obvious why it failed. She wants to have vindication, proper vindication and a real apology in a court of law. Now, we've already seen Justice Lee stand up the Reynolds side of things and say, look, there was no victimisation. It just didn't happen. There's no evidence of it. So the case, when it goes ahead, and I think it's going to go for 5 or 6 weeks, it's inevitable, I would say, that it will result in a victory for Linda Reynolds. I think it's good form for Brittany Higgins to start to recognise the reality of what happened. I mean, I'll preface all of this by saying I've got no doubt at all that Justice Lee was quite correct in finding that Ms Higgins was in fact sexually assaulted on the balance of probabilities, not the criminal standard. But that doesn't take away anything from the separate argument about was there a cover-up, was there victimisation by her former employers in the Morrison government, and that needs to be put to bed.
And that comes into Channel 10 and Lisa Wilkinson saying they were vindicated. I would question that, because that entire report, that interview with Brittany Higgins began with Lisa Wilkinson presenting this as some sort of a political cover-up, saying that this is a young woman forced to choose between pursuing justice and her career. So that was pretty much the story. It seemed to be more so the story than the actual assault.
That was the reason it was pitched to 10. When David Shiraz pitched this story, this narrative, to 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, it was all about a political cover-up. The sexual assault was at the base of it, but the national significance of this was the supposed cover-up, the misuse of a sexual assault by the Morrison government.
Involving 2 female ministers, the PMO's office. We've seen all that communication now.
And let's not forget the Labor members of Parliament who were also hounding those ministers in Parliament. Got to leave it there, Chris. Thank you so much for coming chatting to us on Outsiders, as always, and getting your perspective there. Want to see the NACC, whether they'll do their job. After the break, James's donkey votes, and we've got much more coming up here on Outsiders.
Hello, you're watching Outsiders. I'm James Morrow, back on deck again this week, as always, with Rowan, you want fries with that, Dean, and Rita, cooking with gas Panahi. Hey, so, have I got a great, tasty little story for you? It's all about Joe Biden and cannibals and xenophobia and a credulous media that simply refuses to do its fact-checking job of anything the Democrat president says. You're gonna love this. Now, if you watched the U.S. Report with James Morrow Friday night at 8 p.m., you would 8 p.m. The U.S. Report, you know the one. You would have heard Joe Biden telling a tale about his late Uncle Bozie, a World War II veteran who met a, well, shall we just say, a grisly end, according to him.
We called him Uncle Bozie. He was shot down. He was an Army Air Corps before there was an Air Force. He flew single-engine planes, reconnaissance flights over New Guinea. He had volunteered because someone couldn't make it. He got shot down in an area where there were a lot of cannibals in New Guinea at the time. They never recovered his body, but the government went back when I went down there and they checked and found some parts of the plane and the like.
I'm sorry, what? Cannibals? Now, not surprisingly, this story has become a new feature of Biden's campaign speeches. In fact, he made similar remarks to this at least twice in the past 24 hours, making Uncle Bozie and the Cannibals, sounds like a really good band there, putting it up there in the pantheon of bogus Biden stories, like his often repeated story of the fake train conductor, or all the times he whipped up a tale about a small kitchen fire at his home in Wilmington to sound like something like the 1851 Great San Francisco Fire. Now, let's break this down here, because there's a lot more going on than just the cannibal lie. Telling a story about your uncle being eaten by cannibals in Papua New Guinea, look, I'm going to say it right here. This sounds a bit like the sort of thing that might be called, if somebody else said it, xenophobia, or even racism. I mean, those PNG folks, they'd be cannibals? What? Particularly when it has been called out by PNG academics, with academics and officials saying that, quote, hey, we wouldn't just eat any white man that fell out of the sky. Great response there with a bit of humor from them. And even CNN now has called the claims false and misleading, because apparently poor Uncle Bozie went missing over the Pacific Ocean, not over the supposedly cannibal-infested jungles of Papua New Guinea. And I'm sorry, also we've got to take this further, because could you imagine, just think about this, the reaction of the press if a certain Donald J. Trump had claimed that one of his families falsely had been eaten by the natives in PNG? I mean, the national conversation, we wouldn't hear the end of it. Remember back when the coronavirus was on, you know, and don't worry, by the way, I'm not going to start talking about vaccines, but Joe Biden said that, and he slammed Trump for being xenophobic when he talked about where it came from.
But neither should we panic or fall back on xenophobia. Labeling COVID-19 a foreign virus does not displace accountability for the misjudgments that have been taken thus far by the Trump administration.
Note how much more coherent back then Joe Biden sounded. Different guy. But anyway, let's put that to one side, because we will also never forget how the media piled on Trump for telling this simple, incontrovertible truth.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China.
China. Yeah, look, I admit I played that last clip just because I missed the way he said the word. China. Anyway, you almost got to feel sorry now for poor White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre, who had to try and roll this particular Biden lie in glitter.
Why is President Biden saying that his uncle Bozy was eaten by cannibals?
Look, I was there. I think you traveled with us too to Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if you were there at the memorial in Scranton. The president had a emotional and I think a symbolic moment.
Oh, yes, it was an emotional moment, a symbolic reaction. We all do that, you know, symbolic moments where we just go, yeah, that's what he was eaten by cannibals. But apparently, you know, it is the press's fault, according to KJP, for asking the hard questions.
Why is he saying that his uncle was eaten by cannibals? That is a bad way to go.
He lost his life. It's not, look, I'm not, we should not make jokes about this.
It's not.
Wait.
President Biden said that his uncle was eaten by cannibals.
I mean, your last line, it's for a laugh. It's for a funny statement. And he takes this very seriously. His uncle, who served and protected this country, lost his life serving. And that should matter.
As Joe himself might say, Uncle Bozy getting eaten by cannibals, not a joke.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. Well, joining us now, the latest on the US presidential race and broader issues facing the global economy is Paul Sheard, the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Power of Money. Paul, great to see you back in Australia. I hope you're not flying over Papua New Guinea. Be careful if you are. Just joking. Obviously, Karine Jean-Pierre. Paul, last time we had you on, we argued a bit about digital currencies and central banks. So let's argue some more about digital currencies and central banks. Before we get into what's happening on the American election, I've been increasingly talking about the dangers of cash disappearing. We had that discussion. Tell us your thoughts. Are we heading towards CBDCs? Is this a danger? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
Well, I think we are heading towards CBDC, central bank digital currencies, Rowan, and I think that the technology is obviously unfolding in that direction. But central banks, I think, as we discussed last year, have embraced the idea. So I think we're going to get there. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it depends on how it's handled. And I think certainly, as you are suggesting, a lot of guardrails need to be put around this. But in some sense, the idea of central bank digital currency is, general citizenry can hold paper banknotes, claims on the government, claims on the central bank. Banks can hold digital claims on the central bank. Why can't the general public also, in this day and age of technology, do so as well?
So what about the fears regarding, we've seen the authoritarianism during COVID when the Canadian government was quite happy to seize control of people's ability to spend money if they disagreed with them politically. An absolutely disgraceful occurrence, and that happened like that, blink of an eye. You talk about guardrails, but what would those guardrails need to be, Paul?
Well, I think, there are legal issues, there are issues of norms. Weaponizing the monetary system, whether it's at that individual level that you referenced with the Canadian truck drivers, or whether it's at a global level where we see now the whole international monetary system, in some sense, being kind of used as a weapon of geopolitics. As an economist who, thinks that money is a good thing and helps the world go around, that's not a good idea. So part of it is, you can put legal guardrails in place, but I think kind of as a society, we need to express and assert our norms that monetary affairs should be within the limits of, tax law and other laws, money laundering, etc., are very much a privacy issue.
Absolutely. Rita?
Paul, turn to the US election. Do you believe the lawfare we're seeing, the charges against Trump, civil, criminal, and the fact that the New York case is stopping him campaigning? He's required to sit there in court, so he's visiting bodegas in Harlem. He can't be actually where he needs to be in the swing states. Is that going to play a factor? Is that going to get Biden and the Democrats across the line?
I don't think so. And listening to James's lead-in, by the way, that I'm tempted to say that he may have alighted upon a new metaphor for the 2024 presidential election. And I'm not talking about donkey vote, I'm talking about cannibalism. Dog-eat-dog politics is really getting to the extreme. Look, Rita, as somebody who grew up, in the Australian political system, cast my votes here, it's pretty shocking to see the way in which the legal system in the US is being weaponized for political purposes. There are 4 indictments and 88 felony accounts against the president. And let's not forget that, the certain forces at play tried to keep Trump off the ballot by invoking this insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, the Supreme Court, no less, after the Colorado Supreme Court said, this is, we should knock him off the ballot, the Supreme Court 9-0 said, no, you can't do that sort of thing. So it is a concern that rather than fighting out politics at the ballot box, to an increasing extent, it's being done through the legal system.
James.
Paul, and also the financial system, of course, is also being weaponized potentially here. Inflation is really sticky, and that's going to cause problems with the potential dropping of interest rates, which would ease consumer pressures in the U.S. What are the chances then that Janet Yellen and Federal Reserve officials then open up the sluices of money in other ways to prime the economy, to get cash in consumers' pockets and make them feel good before the November election?
Well, I think in terms of Janet Yellen, of course, Secretary of the Treasury, the fiscal policy is pretty much baked in the cake. There has been a lot of, money printing that's taken place under the Biden administration, a lot of government spending that's in the pipeline is going to keep coming through, James. In terms of the Federal Reserve, that's quite interesting because everybody in the markets and the Federal Reserve itself had expected that the Fed, by the second half of the year, getting closer to the election, would be cutting interest rates 1, 2, 3 times. As you mentioned, inflation has come down, but it's proving quite sticky. And the Fed is now changing its tune a little bit and sending out some signals that maybe it won't be able to move as early as people thought to cut interest rates. So interest rates are likely to remain higher than people thought. But let's not forget that also reflects a stronger economy. But they'll need to keep interest rates elevated to bring inflation down because it's not at their target yet.
And just very quickly, Paul, we've only got 20 seconds left, but you've got a tip. You don't think Biden's going to be around for the election. Tell us why.
Rowan, that's more of a tail risk. I've taken the view all along that I didn't think that Biden would be the candidate come November 2024. Now, everything looks like he will. If you remember when he announced in 2016, he said he'd be a transition candidate. And, I think he is a weak candidate in various ways. I would not be totally surprised if he was swapped out before the election. It's not the main case scenario, but it's a tail risk, or maybe something on the radar screen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul Scheer. Thanks so much, author of Power of Money. Thanks for coming on Outsiders again. After the break, censorship on The Clown Show. Roll up, step right this way. It's the craziest, wackiest show on earth. It's the Canberra Clown Show, where Australia has literally become the laughing stock of the world, thanks to Albozo's e-safety commissioner. Who? Well, a bit of background. Let's start with the ghastly tragedy at Bondi Junction last weekend. What was Albo's response to the horrific Bondi murders by a mentally ill man? Albozo focused on Australian men in general, scolding us that we must change our behaviour and stop disrespecting women, rather than perhaps pointing the finger of blame at the health authorities and questioning why an unhinged schizophrenic with a grudge against women was roaming the streets of Sydney. 48 hours later, we had an alleged terrorist event and stabbing, after which Albanese had another revelation.
It's difficult to balance freedom of movement with public safety, but after an issue like this, there no doubt will be consideration given, and any changes, I'm sure, will work with the New South Wales government as well.
Whoa, hold your horses there, PM. What changes with that? What was that? Curtailing freedom of movement, balance freedom? What on earth is Labor up to?
We have Michelle Rowland's taken really strong action with some of the online products, Facebook, X as it's now known, to get material taken down as well. That can be really, really confronting. The misinformation, disinformation, as well as using online propaganda to promote hatred. The authorities need to be given whatever power they need to crack down on these issues.
Whatever power they need to crack down. Now I get it. Not only does Albanese apparently plan to curtail or balance our freedom of movement, whatever that was about, Albozo also wants whatever powers he needs to tackle misinformation and disinformation. In other words, censorship. And Labor is not mucking around. Already they have started banning certain things online, but not what you might think. Crazed Islamic preachers like this one in Sydney's western suburbs can still be found online, disgustingly celebrating the aftermath of October 7th.
I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage.
No, we won't be censoring any of that in Albozo's Clown Show. Instead, we will censor the victims of the crimes, so Australians can hear lunatics like that celebrating terrorist atrocities 6 months after the event, but less than 6 days after an alleged terrorist event in Sydney, this government is banning Australians from seeing what occurred. Yes, George Orwell's Big Brother is now alive and well in Australia, only it's actually Big Sister in the guise of our e-safety commissioner, an American woman named Julie Inman Grant. Who? Julie Inman Grant, who was appointed by Malcolm Turnbull to make the internet a safer place for us all, but mainly for kiddies.
Well, good morning. I'm here with Julie Inman Grant, who is the e-safety commissioner. And Julie is heading up our federal government's effort to make the internet a safer place for everybody online, but of course, especially children.
Under Albanese, Inman Grant now has an increased budget of $42 million a year of your money to police what you can and cannot see online, along with a very healthy annual salary of almost $445,000. You also paid $40,000 for her to trot off to Davos to attend the World Economic Forum, where she blithely dismissed the American concept of free speech as not being relevant in Australia.
Hi, I'm Julie Inman Grant, Australia's e-safety commissioner. I attended the World Economic Global Summit as the e-safety commissioner.
Do you believe that the First Amendment has too high a bar for the online era?
The First Amendment does not apply in Australia. The First Amendment does not apply in Australia.
So who exactly is she making the internet a safer place for with your money? Well, certainly not average Australians and certainly not conservative Australians. Rather, Miss Inman Grant is a radical woke activist using her vast power and funding, in my opinion, to aggressively promote woke identity politics, including transgenderism, and to censor information about Islamism. But you be the judge. Strike one. This time last year, Julie Inman Grant disgracefully banned a tweet by breastfeeding expert Jasmine Sussex. Jasmine simply criticised an article about a transgender woman, in other words, a biological male, and his supposed attempts to lactate or chest feed. That tweet from a wonderful Australian mum and breastfeeding and health expert can no longer be viewed in Australia, although you can read it elsewhere in the world. Strike two. Last month, the entire world was astonished when Julie Inman Grant banned a tweet criticising an Australian transgender man, i.e. a biological female, who has had her breasts removed and who has a proclivity for bondage, shares images of bestiality and such like, who has been appointed to the World Health Organization. The banned tweet simply showed the photo of this person, Teddy Cook, and set out reasons why the author thought he was unfit for the job at the UN, this individual. The E-Safety Commissioner's notice to X threatens civil penalty proceedings and a maximum penalty of $782,000 for failure to remove that tweet. But it looks like Julie Inman Grant's zealous advocacy for transgenderism has backfired.
Julie Inman Grant, I want to thank her very much for bringing attention to this issue. It wasn't very smart. This is the Streisand effect in full bloom. The original tweet was only seen 450,000 times. Now it's at 1.5 million, and all the subsequent tweets by people like yourself and politicians and everything, it must have exceeded 20 million now.
As Victorian Libertarian MP David Limbrick says, Julie Inman Grant has made a laughing stock of this nation and brought us into disrepute. Strike three. Now this week, Julie Inman Grant is back again, banning and censoring the graphic vision of the alleged stabbing event that occurred earlier this week in a church in Sydney. That's right, you are not allowed to see what was live streamed in Sydney, an attack of the popular Bishop Mari Emanuel.
So if they fail to remove the content, then we can go to the search engines such as Google or Bing to really minimize the amount of content the Australians can see.
Welcome to our own Orwellian dystopia. As one person said on Twitter, it is a stupid, ignorant overreach that betrays a profound misunderstanding of the Commissioner's role and the intent of the legislation. Julie Inman Grant clearly lacks the capacity to perform her duties and is abusing her powers. End of quote. And Elon Musk's X has now put out a statement saying, quote, Australia's E-Safety Commissioner does not have the authority to dictate what content X's users can see globally. We will robustly challenge this unlawful and dangerous approach in court, which threatens free speech everywhere. This woman, the E-Safety Commissioner, has made a laughingstock of us all, of Australia. She is out of control. What a clown show. As David Bowie always said, watch out for Big Brother and beware the savage jaw of 1984. James, what's been going on with our Gazan refugees?
Well, Rowan, I think that the Prime Minister may be guilty of spreading a little misinformation.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No, let me tell you about this. You remember a couple of months ago, after October 7th, the Prime Minister said, well, we're going to admit a couple of thousand Gazans, on humanitarian visas, let them come and escape what's happening over there. And we're sure that after doing checks that lasted as long as an hour, that they have no connections to Hamas or anything like that. The Prime Minister also said these are temporary, not permanent. They're going to go back. Well, already now the Daily Telegraph today has reported that more than 100 of them have already applied for asylum. Now, what does that mean? That means that once they're here and they've applied, it's almost impossible to get rid of them because it takes years and years and years for these things to work their way through the courts, even if rejected. And I think the government removed a total of 14 failed asylum seekers in the last year, which tells you how serious they are if any of these guys gets their claims rejected. These Gazans, they're here to stay.
So, again, Labor are so good on immigration, aren't they? I mean, they're just such a talented team they've got there. Anyway, Rita.
Well, let's look at some footage from Utah. This is from a middle school where students walked out to protest what are called furries. They're these freaks that think they're animals. And apparently these furries are biting and terrorising the other students. Let's have a look.
We are so excited you're here. We could use another dog. So what do you want to do first? Find a chew toy? Oh, chase our tail? Oh, I know. Let's sniff.
No, actually, I like to play with yarn. Or I like to clean my paws like this.
There we go.
The right video. Where are the furries? The poor kids. All right.
Don't worry. Well,
we'll have
very
that
good.
Monday night. I think that video was.
It was a teaser for your show on Monday night.
It was a teaser for my show. No, that video was like a little video that a school had put together to explain
transgenderism to kids.
Why it's fine for a little boy or girl to.
The propaganda never stops. It never stops. Quick call out to the Kings River Tavern in Western Australia and Sam James there, who only takes cash. So we got a photo of her. She only takes cash in her restaurant. So I wanted to say that because well done. Here we go. There she is. Could call out to her. So go to the Kings River Tavern there, northeast of Albany, and support her. Rita,
Mark
apparently.
Dreyfus. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Mark Dreyfus. Yeah,
let's quickly have he got toasted on X this week because again he's used an attack to have a go at men in general, what you were talking about. And Rachel Wong mentioned to him, you couldn't even tell me what a woman is. I mean, these people who can't even define what a woman is, who want to seize upon cases to push their political barrows, give me a break. And before we go, we should actually take a note of this warning that employers are getting.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just going to read this directly from the piece. Australian bosses are being urged to protect their workers' fertility as climate change, yes, rising temperatures, add to a rapid decline in the sperm quality of men.
Spermageddon, it's called. It's in the Adelaide Sunday Mail.
It was the headline, Spermageddon.
Climate change is leading to Spermageddon. There you go. That's it for Outsiders. There is 5:30 this evening in Bondi, just south of Bondi Pavilion, down at the beach there. There is a vigil, which will be here on Sky as well, which will be broadcast to commemorate the horrific tragedy from last weekend, so make sure you pop on down there. And don't forget Rita during the week at 11 o'clock at night and James on Friday at 8 o'clock. See you next week at 9 a.m. Bye.